The courtroom was packed that Tuesday morning, and I could feel Karen Whitfield's smug satisfaction radiating from across the aisle. She sat in her power suit, lips pursed in that familiar self-righteous way, whispering to her lawyer as if she had already won. The HOA president was ready to teach the stubborn ranch owner a lesson, or so she thought, until Judge Morrison called the case to order and asked if I had legal representation. I rose slowly, adjusted my tie with practiced ease, and replied, "Your Honor, I'll be representing myself. Karen's lawyer," a young man named Bradley Cooper, smirked at that. Poor kid had no idea what was coming. "Very well," the judge said. "Please state your qualifications for the record." I cleared my throat. "Thomas Mitchell, retired attorney, 35 years with Mitchell and Associates, specializing in property law and civil litigation. Member of the State Bar since 1987, the smirk vanished from Cooper's face, and Karen's mouth dropped open before she quickly caught herself. Life on Cedar Ridge Ranch was supposed to be peaceful. After decades of courtroom battles and corporate negotiations, I had purchased the 100-acre property precisely for its isolation. No neighbors for miles, no HOA rules, just me, my horses, and the occasional visit from my grandkids. The land had been in the Henderson family for 3 generations before I bought it, and old Jim Henderson had made one thing clear: this ranch had never been part of any homeowners association. The nearest subdivision, Willowbrook Estates, was 2 miles away, separated by county land and my property line. For the first year, everything was perfect. Then Karen Whitfield was elected HOA president. Our first encounter came on a crisp October morning. I was repairing a section of fence when a white Lexus SUV pulled up to my gate. Out stepped a woman in her 50s, highlighted hair perfectly coiffed, clipboard in hand. "Excuse me," she called in a tone that suggested she was used to being obeyed. "I need to speak with you about community trail access." I set down my hammer and walked to the gate, keeping the bars between us. "Can I help you?" "I'm Karen Whitfield, president of the Willowbrook Estates HOA," she announced, as though I should be impressed. "We're implementing a new community trail system, and we need to establish an easement through your property to connect to the county hiking paths." I nearly laughed. "Ma'am, this is private property. It isn't part of your HOA." Her smile tightened. "Well, that's what we need to discuss. The community has decided that interconnected trails would benefit everyone, increase property values, and promote healthy living." "That sounds nice for your community," I said evenly. "But this ranch has never been part of Willowbrook Estates." She tapped her clipboard with a manicured nail. "Mr. Mitchell, I don't think you understand how these things work. When a community decides something is for the greater good, individual holdouts can't just block progress." That was the moment I knew she would be trouble. "Ma'am, I understand perfectly," I told her. "The answer is no. Have a nice day." I turned back to my fence. Behind me, I heard her huff and the slam of her car door. Over the next 6 months, her campaign escalated from irritating to outright illegal. First came the letters, printed on official HOA letterhead, demanding I attend board meetings I had no obligation to attend. Then came complaints to the county about imaginary code violations, each requiring me to waste time with inspectors who always left shaking their heads at her nonsense. She even organized community walks, where groups gathered at my property line, pointing and snapping photos like tourists at a zoo. The turning point came in April. I arrived at my back gate to find the padlock cut and fresh tire tracks leading onto my land. Trail markers had been hammered into trees along my private road. I spent the afternoon removing them and installed security cameras. The footage was illuminating. At 2 o'clock the following Tuesday morning, there was Karen herself, bolt cutters in hand, approaching my new lock. I let her cut it, recorded as she drove onto my property with 2 other HOA board members, and watched them install more trail markers. The next morning, I hired a crew to weld a proper steel gate with concrete posts. I also had my attorney at the time send a cease and desist letter to Karen and the HOA board. That's when she made her biggest mistake. She sued me. The lawsuit arrived on a Friday afternoon, hand-delivered by a process server who looked embarrassed to be there. Karen Whitfield and the Willowbrook Estates. HOA were suing me for malicious obstruction of community resources, interference with established easements, and, my personal favorite, creating a public nuisance. They demanded immediate removal of all barriers to access, $50,000 in damages plus legal fees. I read the complaint twice, unsure whether to be more amused or annoyed. Her lawyer had thrown every possible claim at the wall, hoping something would stick. Historical use, implied easements, even a suggestion that my land had once been part of a larger parcel with public access commitments. All of it was fabrication, but it required a response. That's when I decided to dust off my bar license. No sense paying another attorney for something I could handle myself. I filed my answer, denied every allegation, and countersued for trespass, harassment, and defamation. Then I prepared for what I knew would be an entertaining day in court. Karen had no idea she had just picked a legal fight with someone who'd spent 3 decades eating lawyers like hers for breakfast. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for the Tuesday morning I mentioned earlier. Karen arrived with an entourage, her lawyer, 2 HOA board members, and someone who appeared to be taking notes for the community newsletter. She even wore a small HOA president pin on her lapel, as if it carried some kind of legal weight. Judge Morrison, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, presided. I had appeared before her many times during my career, and though she didn't recognize me at first, I saw the spark of recognition when I stated my credentials. "Mr. Mitchell," she said with a slight nod. "Welcome back to my courtroom." Bradley Cooper rose to give his opening statement. All flash, no substance. He waved his hands dramatically, portraying me as a reclusive curmudgeon, preventing innocent families from enjoying nature. He claimed the trails had existed for decades, that my property was essentially holding the community hostage, and that Karen was only trying to serve her constituents. When my turn came, I kept it simple. "Your Honor, I have here the original deed to my property from 1952, the survey from my 2021 purchase, and sworn affidavits from the previous 3 owners covering 60 years. At no time has any easement existed on this land. At no time has it been part of any HOA. At no time has there been public access." I placed each document on the table, calmly, as Cooper's confidence began to falter. "Furthermore," I said, pulling out a manila folder, "I have security footage of Ms. Whitfield personally trespassing on my property on no fewer than 6 occasions, cutting locks, installing unauthorized markers." I handed the judge printed stills from the videos. I also have 17 harassing letters sent by Ms. Whitfield, records of 9 false complaints to county agencies, and documentation of a coordinated campaign to damage my reputation in the community. Judge Morrison's brows rose as she reviewed the evidence. "Ms. Whitfield, is this you in these photographs?" Karen's face shifted from smug to pink to nearly purple. "That's taken out of context," she sputtered. "The community needed those trails. So you admit to trespassing on Mr. Mitchell's property?" The judge asked. Cooper leapt to his feet. "Your Honor, my client acted under the good faith belief that easements existed. I almost pitied him." "Almost. Your Honor," I said, rising, "I'd like to submit Defense Exhibit C, a recorded phone call between Miss Whitfield and another board member, in which she explicitly states, and I quote, 'I don't care if he owns it. We'll make his life hell until he gives in.'" The courtroom fell silent, broken only by Karen's sharp gasp. "That was a private conversation," she shrieked. "Recorded on my property," I replied evenly. "Your voice carried over my fence during one of your organized gatherings. Single-party consent state, Your Honor, entirely legal." Cooper tried to recover, rambling about community benefit and the greater good, but the damage was already done. Judge Morrison had seen enough. "Counselor," she asked, fixing him with a stare, "does your client have any actual evidence of an easement? Any documentation at all?" He fumbled through his files. "We're still investigating historical records, Your Honor." "So that's a no," the judge said flatly. She turned to me. "Mr. Mitchell, do you wish to proceed with your counterclaims?" "I do, Your Honor. I'm seeking damages for trespass, reimbursement of legal fees, and a permanent restraining order preventing Miss Whitfield or any HOA representative from entering my property. Karen shot to her feet. "You can't do this. I'm the HOA president. I have authority." Judge Morrison's gavel cracked down. "Miss Whitfield, remain seated and silent, or I will hold you in contempt." She then faced me. "Mr. Mitchell, your evidence appears substantial. I am inclined to grant summary judgment in your favor on all counts." Cooper made one last desperate attempt. "Your Honor, we request a continuance to gather additional evidence." "Denied," Judge Morrison said firmly. "I've seen more than enough." Over the next 20 minutes, she systematically dismantled every one of Karen's claims while upholding mine. The ruling was devastating for Karen. Not only were all her claims dismissed with prejudice, meaning she could never refile them, but the court granted my entire countersuit. Karen was ordered to pay $15,000 in damages for trespass, $5,000 in legal fees, a sum I generously kept low despite being entitled to more, and was slapped with a permanent restraining order requiring her to remain at least 500 feet from my property. But Judge Morrison wasn't finished. "Miss Whitfield," she said sternly, "your behavior has been appalling. You abused your position, harassed a law-abiding property owner, and wasted this court's time with frivolous litigation." Turning to Cooper, she added, "Counselor, I strongly suggest you review the State Bar's requirements on due diligence before filing lawsuits. Consider this your warning." Then came the final blow. "I am forwarding this case to the District Attorney's Office for possible criminal trespass charges," Judge Morrison announced, "and I will also be sending a copy of this ruling to the Willowbrook Estates HOA Board, with a strong recommendation that they reconsider their leadership." Karen's face collapsed. "But I was only trying to help the community," she wailed. "No, Miss Whitfield," the judge said coldly. "You were trying to bully someone into surrendering what you wanted. There is a difference." As we exited the courtroom, Karen was immediately surrounded by furious HOA board members whispering about emergency meetings and votes of no confidence. Cooper slipped out quietly without even addressing his client. 3 days later, I received a certified letter from the Willowbrook Estates HOA. Karen had been removed from her presidency by unanimous vote and permanently banned from holding any board position. The criminal trespass charges proceeded, and 2 months later she pled guilty to misdemeanor trespass, earning 12 months probation and 500 hours of community service, explicitly barred from involving HOA activities. The best part came 6 months after that. The State Law School invited me to deliver the keynote lecture for their continuing education series on property law and civil litigation. My topic, When Karens Attack, a case study in Homeowners Association overreach. I used our case as the centerpiece, complete with security footage and transcripts. The video went viral on legal education sites. Karen's legacy wasn't the trail system she once envisioned, but a cautionary tale taught to law students about the perils of abusing authority and underestimating opponents. Through the grapevine, I heard she'd sold her Willowbrook home at a significant loss, relocated to another state, and now worked as a receptionist at a real estate office. Her dreams of HOA power crushed beneath the weight of restraining orders, criminal records, and mounting legal bills. As for the $20,000 in damages and fees, her check cleared. I donated every cent to a legal aid society dedicated to fighting HOA abuse. They named their new conference room the Whitfield Warning Room. The irony was lost on no one.